So when I first encountered her book, Becoming, I was a pretty green minister. I think I just finished seminary at that point. And so new ministers and experienced ministers, we always want to know from the congregation, what do you want us to preach about? There are some fellowships and churches that have a suggestion box for the minister on what you should preach about. You can also just email me. Because we want to be helpful as ministers. I several times heard from congregants, especially in my own home congregation way back in Bremerton, Washington, we want things that inspire us to be our best selves. And here, Michelle Obama is trying to answer that question for us. Invite others in, let go of biases and stereotypes that divide us. It's not about being perfect or where you arrive. Rather, it's about letting your true self be known and being willing to know the true self of others. That's how she lives into becoming, and I think there is great wisdom in her words. This idea of becoming our best selves came up for me at a ministerial fellowship where rookie ministers are able to sit at tables with extraordinary ministers that have shaped our faith over the past few decades. So the rookie ministers sit there going, we don't know what to say because these are like larger than life ministers in Unitarian Universalism. So they broke the ice, just talking about what they'd preached on lately, politics, hope, purpose, social concerns, oppression, problems in the denomination. So as they went around again and again, finally, I brought up the question about being our best selves as we grow into our awareness, talking about that in terms of changes going on in the denomination. When the Reverend Rebecca Savage, one of my idols, pointed out, we never get to be our best selves, Margo. She wasn't actually saying it to me. She was saying it to the whole table. She was saying that is the beauty, that we never get there. And at first, I was sort of taken aback by that. And I want you to listen to the arrogance and perfectionism in the little thought running around in my mind. Arrogant, perfect. Prior to the conversation, I thought, I want to be like the Dalai Lama, to come to a place in my development where I would always act from compassion and courage. But Reverend Rebecca Savage articulated so beautifully, it's a luxury and a privilege of being able to again and again evaluate and live into new insights, deeper levels of connection and more understanding. And the fluidity of the process is the beauty, to give and take and all the mistakes that happen in between. It made me think of Ernest Hemingway's quote, we are all apprentices in a craft that no one ever masters. My favorite singer-songwriter wrote a poem called A Permeable Life, and I read this poem, I think, once here before, so I will only read part of it. But she says, I want to leave enough room in my heart for the unexpected, for the mistake that becomes knowing, for the knowing that becomes wonder, and for the wonder that makes everything porous, allowing in and out all available light. I would rather live unlocked and more often than not astonished, which is possible if I am willing to surrender what I already think I know. So I will stay open and friendly with all that presses from the heart and comes in at a slant and shimmers just below the surface of things. She is talking about the light that lives within, and because she's a Quaker, this is a divine spark for her. I would say that is also completely in concert with what our forebearers, 19th century Unitarian transcendentalists, were saying, that we have the spark within. and creating room in the heart for that spark that's already there to just shine out. To again and again leave our hearts so open that we can be changed, and deepen our perception of what compassion truly means. What does love truly mean? And in every given moment, our responses to that need. I was touched by our covenant this morning. Love is the spirit of this church. That's how we start out our covenant. So, newcomer is also saying, be open to these opportunities. Reverend Rebecca Savage saying, be open to these opportunities that will change you into another level of your best self. Digging deeper, finding a more meaningful and comforting response. Discovering more love in the recesses of your heart that you didn't even know you had. Perhaps it's listening to a friend who's having a difficult time. They need your presence more than they need your words sometimes. And they may not at all need advice unless they ask for it. Giving a person at a tense meeting the benefit of the doubt. Give them a chance to clarify. Asking questions instead of making accusations. I like to smile at complete strangers who look harried in the grocery store. I like to say to them, yeah, been there. I hope this smooths out for you today. I also think about really being kind to people who are working in minimum wage jobs. Something that says, I care about your welfare. Since being in Bozeman, one of the things I have been the most proud of, being the minister at UUFB, is officiating the memorial service for the homeless of Gallatin Valley who died over the last year. And some of them had actually had shelter by the time they died, but they had been homeless for a fair amount of years in the Gallatin Valley. And I represented you at that service. And it has been a moment of incredible pride isn't even the right word. It was that all of you were there with me. It stirred my heart. It gave me sleepless nights. And it reminded me of something that had happened in another fellowship long ago and far, far away that I want to tell, because I don't want to tell stories about our homeless community here in real time. I think that that is invading their privacy as to what happened at the memorial service. But this other story encapsulates the same feeling. So it's the Kitsap UU Fellowship, and it has a history a lot like UUFB in terms of the decades it's been here, how it started out, how it started to expand. And they had a chance to be their best selves. I was officiating a memorial service at that congregation. They were in between ministers. There was no minister to do it. And I knew the person who had died. She had been quietly helping the homeless in the county for over 40 years. And she went into places where health workers and social workers did not go. She went into the deeper woods. She went where the need was the greatest. Her family came to me because her death was rather sudden, and they said, okay, we need a memorial service, and just to let you know, we will have extremely conservative Christians, because that's what came from her decades before, middle of the road Christians, I didn't quite know what that meant, Unitarian Universalists, and people who were experiencing long-term homelessness. They had all been invited. So this collection of souls reflected the life of the woman being honored. She was a very liberal Christian. She had worshiped with us at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for 10 years because the Christian church didn't work for her anymore. And she worked with all those people living in harsh conditions. So the room that day, we had humanists, we had Christians, we had other faith traditions, we had atheists, we had, okay, not all humanists are atheists, never mind. That's another sermon. So, of course, I knew the UUs the best, and what they were the most fearing is Christian proselytizing. Yes. And I say that to add a little humor. But there's also the painful reality that some of the people who come to Unitarian Universalism come because they have been rejected from other churches. They've been called abominations. So there was that pain in the room. There were also issues of hygiene, sobriety, and addiction or substance abuse hanging in the air as well. Fears of not being accepted in this gathering, fears of not fitting in. Everyone at this memorial service was having their comfort level stretched, and for some, it was stretched to the extreme. But did they judge one another? Did they pull back from the interaction or leave prematurely? Did they criticize openly? Or did they develop curiosity and check in with themselves about calming their own fears and engaging and understanding and empathy? And this was the greatest way to honor their friend. Directly before the service, one man said to me, and I could smell old alcohol on him, because if you struggle with alcoholism, you are letting alcohol out through your lungs and your pores. And he said, I didn't drink much today. I really wanted to be totally here for her. And I'll call this man Sam. For him not to drink at all probably would have sent him into a physical withdrawal, so he couldn't really do that. But he wanted to be fully there for his friend. And in his belief system, she would know he was there. And I knew what this meant for him. Beyond the physical discomfort, it meant that he had to stand in all that emotion and grief and have no way to blunt it with alcohol. At that moment, he was one of the most courageous people I had ever met. It must have been terrifying. We talked for a moment, and someone he knew came up and touched him on the arm and communicated that they would sit together. I know that Sam was experiencing at that moment a new depth of being his best self. And I knew that anybody else with discomfort in the room could get through this. And again, not because he was drinking less, but he was standing there in this place where he doubted whether he fit in. He doubted his worth and dignity in this space, and he did it anyway, in all that vulnerability. And I think all the people in the room started to pick this up. If I use newcomers' words, they were all unlocked and astonished. A few days before, we realized that when the service was being planned, that the planners became aware that there's a dinner in the community that would occur almost at the same time. And it's a dinner for low-income people, for homeless people, just for people who want to be there. It was over at the Episcopal Church. So we were like, we need to serve a meal here, because otherwise people are missing their opportunity to have the meal elsewhere. So we put tables outside and inside, and it was a warm day, and there's a beautiful courtyard. The planners wanted everyone to have choices about where they would sit. And most people chose to sit inside, and those who had been unsheltered or homeless chose tables outside. I didn't see really how that sorted itself. The meal was served, and the kitchen staff is finally just getting a moment to get themselves a plate of food when someone says, "The cigarette smoke from the deck is wafting this way. Should we close the doors?" I'm just going to let you sit with that question for a second. They all stood there, paper plates in their hands, looking at one another, tears in their eyes. And then they started sharing a couple ideas. And they all knew, in the harsh light of society's judgment, what these people feared the most who were out on the deck smoking is to be shunned, was to be seen as useless, that they have been harassed in the past, they have been spit upon, they are have been told they are throwaway people. So the coordinators looked at each other and said, no, we will not close the doors. And cleverly, transformed, I would say, they took the fans that had been blowing the air from the outside in and flipped them around. So it now blew the smoke away from the open door. No muss, no fuss, no one noticed. It was incredible to be in the midst of all those people that day, being so open and vulnerable, and all of them leaving enough room in their hearts. And I think through the conversation, it changed everyone in that room. I can easily see something very similar happening here because I know your hearts and I know your ability to go deeper when you're thinking about solutions. And that's why I tell you that story, because I don't think it's unique to that fellowship at all. It's you. With our chalice lighting words today, we're from Marianne Williamson, who challenges us not to be afraid of our own inherent worth and dignity, rather to engage with great pride. Such actions in turn allow those around us to do the same. If you've got a little courage, it helps the people next to you to show theirs as well. So not to shortchange ourselves, to use a Christian phrase, not to hide our light under a bushel. Times for love and kindness and generosity and justice will come your way again and again. It just came our way quite recently at Climate Advocacy Day for more than 300 people who gathered in the Capitol building in Helena on January 20th. Lots of people there weren't sure how to talk to their legislators, and many of them knew it wouldn't make a difference on the vote for House Bill 170. But they showed up. They supported one another. We grieved together when the House bill repealed the contained aspirations for a clean climate. We stood with young people who we know have to live on this planet so much longer than we do. On the way back, and I think also, imagine if only 40 people had shown up. For those teenagers who are the plaintiffs in Held versus Montana for a livable climate, and for our siblings who came from the Crow and the Blackfeet nations to speak and to pray. So it may not have changed House Bill 170, but it changed everybody else there. We were a team. We could go out and face the next challenge. So in the coming weeks, let yourself continue to grow into your best self. I will close with the words from the Reverend Alex Klingenberg. You can close your eyes. Inner guide, may I heed your wisdom. May I love myself enough to displease others. May I have courage to do hard things. May I release perfection in favor of improvement. With awe and gratitude, may I make my life a tapestry of love. Amen.